Live from the Big Tomato, this is Kings Pod 2020 with Jeff and Toke. Jeff, what's going on, man?
Toke, what's happening, man? Good to be back with you.
Well,
I have a question for you, Toke.
Go ahead.
Are we having any fun yet?
I'm actually
Is this
having a lot
fun
of
for you?
Yeah, it is.
You
actually.
think so? Tell me more.
So, I think with the Kings, I don't know why that's looping. That's a mistake. Okay. With the Kings, I think that, like, really the worst thing you can have happen is when they're mid. I think it's, like, almost better when they're bad. I mean, it's not better for, like, our soul. Like, spiritually, it's worse. You know, from a cosmic standpoint, it's not better. But I think very clearly there's a lot more to talk about when they're just terrible. So from that perspective, we can commiserate and bond as Kings fans over this collective shared trauma that we have. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, listen, man, the Kings are so bad, and they've been so bad for my entire life. Almost, I should say, my entire life. As a matter of fact, my friend just had a baby, and I was like, bro, I can't believe you would do that to your kid. Like, how can you bring a child into this world knowing that they have to be a Sacramento Kings fan? It's our curse, and we have to pass it on the generation to generation. It's generational trauma, like you said, and so it just is what it is. It's part of growing up in Sacramento is you got to deal with the Kings and you got to deal with these trials and tribulations, and they always seem to be the same trials and tribulations. It's not like we learn from one mistake and we create all new ones. It's the same mistake that we keep making, and it's always roster construction.
I've got this weird, like, almost like this hot chick syndrome where because the Kings were the best team in the NBA when I was kind of like becoming a man and hitting puberty, I'm kind of like the girl that was really hot in high school, but like doesn't realize 20 something years later that you're not that, you know, popular cheerleader anymore. Like, to me, I look at the Kings and it's been like the real Kings franchise is this popular cheerleader, right? And like whatever's been happening has been the deviation, but like that doesn't actually make any logical sense, because if you look at the 40 years they've been here, really the 8 years that they weren't terrible, which is only 20% of the time they've been here, that's the outlier. Like, that's the abnormal part. But I don't know, like, just it was such a formative part of my upbringing and maturation process and adolescence that it's like, how are we not just reverting back to what we should be? I know.
But I think what you've just said is like the perfect example of the curse that I'm talking about, because that's your perspective, and I think that's a lot of Sacramento's people's perspective, because they, again, like we talked about last time, they overvalue everybody on the Kings. They overvalue what we bring to the table. I think from the outside perspective, we've always just been an awful organization. I mean, like, people will recognize that we got screwed in the early 2000s and we should have won championships, but we didn't. And so people will look at the Sacramento Kings from the outside and be like, bro, you were never the hot chick in high school. Like, that was never you. But you had I guess maybe you had the confidence. I don't know what it is.
We had a hot year.
Yeah, right. It's like that was never you. So I don't know, man. It is what it is. But, you know, with this existing group that we have the pleasure to talk about, I think we got some things to jump into. Specifically, you know, what did you think about those Keon Ellis chants that were raining through the arena during the third quarter last night?
Yeah, I like how we're going to start small and go to big. I think that's probably the appropriate way to run it. I mean, like, look, man, at the end of the day, this goes back to what I was saying last week or a week and a half ago or whenever we recorded. Again, like, should Keon Ellis be playing when you are a poor defensive team and he's kind of a top level 3-and-D guy? Yeah, he should. But like, is Keon Ellis the reason that they're 3-7? Or is the lack of Keon Ellis the reason that they're 3-7? Like, Keon Ellis could be ran out there for 36 minutes a night. It's like the fundamental. Yeah, maybe it would be a little better. Maybe your defensive rating would be a little better. Maybe the offense would flow a little better because he's a guy who isn't ball dominant and kind of does what he does and plays within himself. So I think that it's a mistake that they're not playing him more. But again, like, as Kings fans, we're fixating on this guy who's a role player. And it's like, is that really the thing that we need to focus on? You do not have a playable forward currently available on the roster. You signed a guy off the street in Precious Achiuwa, and he starts for you.
Right.
Like,
Yep. Hey, is that not the most Kings thing ever?
It's like the right move to start him. Like, that's actually
of course. Yeah.
It's not like,
that's how bad the roster is. You got to find some guy off the street and be like, listen, bro, we need you to be our starting forward. Like, that's what it is. You know, I saw Doug Christie's post game last night. I know we're going to get into Doug Christie a little bit later, but I saw his post game last night, and they were, dude, he gets asked every night, what's going on with Keon Ellis? What's going on? Are you guys going to play him more? And I think he kind of took the same thought process that you had, where he was like, you know, there's individual defenders and then there's team defense, and individual defenders don't win you games. Team defense wins you games. And until the team can get their act together and care, it's not going to make a difference if you have one good individual defender in there. Now, again, you get 2 40-point quarters dropped on you. The second and the third quarter last night were both 40-point quarters. And at no point are we like, maybe we should put in one of our best defenders. There's clearly an issue there. But, you know, I think there is something to be said for, if you're going to have everyone else be offense only, Keon Ellis isn't going to come in there and change your stars.
The Kings, I believe, after last night's performance, fell from 26th in the NBA in defensive rating to 27th.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consider that they've had back-to-back games now where they've like let the other team put up over 130 points, it makes you wonder what 3 teams are worse than them.
Right.
Like, that's
Who
just
could be worse.
Like, how are they not dead last in the NBA? I mean, like, look, Keon Ellis, man, at the end of the day, it's like I can kind of already tell, because I know how Kings fans are. He's the type of player that when you look at someone like Lou Dort on OKC or another good player on pick your competent franchise that wins, I don't know, like an Avery Bradley on the Celtics or something like that, right? Whereas Kings fans for the last 15 years, I'm going to say, we've looked and been like, why can't the Kings find anyone like that? And you kind of did with Keon Ellis. You found that guy who's like a 3-and-D support player.
Right.
But the thing is, like, those guys look really good on the Celtics or on the Thunder, current iteration of the Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
But like on the Kings, they're not going to be difference makers. They're just role players. And until you have that solid foundation of like a star player to build around, or a handful of like significantly above average players at their position, because that's another way to do a build. Historically, you're not as successful with that, but we have seen that work occasionally. And like, look, you got Keon Ellis. You're doing everything in your power as an organization to take this player who was an undrafted player you brought up through Stockton, and you built a significant amount of value. He's number 6 on the upcoming free agents list for ESPN.
Right.
And if ESPN knows that, other GMs know that at a significantly higher level. You were unwilling to include him in a Jonathan Kuminga trade from what the reporting is, okay?
Yeah.
You picked up his option, making him an unrestricted free agent next summer, and then you're not playing him. So you're basically guaranteeing that if you go to free agency, he's going to walk because there's not going to be any goodwill to stay here because he's not getting minutes.
Right.
Some other team is going to come in and throw money at him. And even if you're probably going to have to overpay to keep him, which is not a good place to be. Like, again, it's a master class in the Kings stumbling into something that's good and somehow still squandering it, right?
Right.
Like, you draft Isaiah Thomas with the last pick in the second round, like basically the Mr. Irrelevant pick of the NBA.
Right. Correct.
The guy balls out for you. Like, we all remember the Isaiah years. The guy was just
awesome.
a killer.
Yeah.
Right?
It was awesome.
And then you decide, you know what? We're going to trade him to Phoenix for a trade exception because we don't want to keep him. And like, you could have kept him for like a bargain, you know?
Right.
And this is just the latest iteration of that. There's been other examples over the years where it's like, you, by no like merit of your own, just like sheer luck, you luck into this piece that's valuable. Is he going to be the guy who turns the franchise around? Not even close. He's a role player. And you do everything in your power to just destroy the thing you stumbled into.
Yeah, I mean, again, we talk about it a lot, but, you know, Lou Dort didn't turn the franchise around.
No.
He's just a great role player. And he's going to go in there and he's going to do his job, and he's good at his job. And that's exactly where Keon Ellis needs to be. But we need Keon Ellis to come in and save our season defensively. And again, that's just not how it. That's not a good place to be. That's not a good spot to be. Like, it's the same thing we always do. We expect these guys they're not the guy to come in and be the guy. And so, you know, it's like you said, it's the repeat of the cycle that we're in. And I do think that if Keon Ellis left, again, you put Keon Ellis on the Warriors, he's going to be good on the Warriors. You put him on one of these teams that knows how to win and just expects him to do his role and play his game, he's going to go and be really good.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, we're set up to have him walk away for absolutely nothing. And even at this point, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is a trade at this point, we're going to get way less value from him, because why is somebody going to give up a bunch of draft capital or players for somebody who, first of all, is not playing? So clearly it shows that we don't value him, and they can go sign him next year without having to give up anything. If they really want him, just get your checkbook out.
Yeah, dude. Well, I was going to say who has cap space, but then I realized like you could just give him the mid-level exception, because that's what type of player you sign with a mid-level exception, right? So, okay.
He gets his 14, 15 mil, whatever it is, and like, that's it.
Again, wild.
Correct.
Wild that a guy like that
the
gets
the money is outrageous, but still.
Okay. So in the time that I kind of stepped away from the Kings and, you know, I had to start winning, and I started winning by stepping away from the Kings. Highly recommend.
Yep.
If you're capable of it. It's not easy. My understanding is the Kings did something similar to this with Dante DiVincenzo, where like they kind of try to tank his value by not playing him, which might be what they're doing with Keon, by the way. It's like, oh, maybe if we don't play him, there won't be as much of a market for him next summer. Do you see any parallels there?
I don't, actually. I don't remember DiVincenzo being. I don't remember him being as hyped up as Keon is right now within the Kings fan base, because we saw DiVincenzo play in a bunch of different places before this, or before he came to Sacramento. And I don't recall him as hyped up in the city as much. I think people like Keon because, like you said, he's come up through the Sacramento system. Like, he's actually a shining example of what is possible in our system, and he's one of very, very few shining examples of what's possible in our system. And so, I think that's the reason that the fans are all about him. But if that's the strategy, that is dumb, dude. I mean, that is as dumb as it gets. You're going to tank someone's value, and then you're going to be like, come back and join us. You have the option to go play wherever you want. He's going to come back to the team that tanked his value. Like, what is this? It makes no sense.
Scottie Pippen's not walking through that door. So, you know, you got to make do with Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray, especially when you're Coach Christie and as a player, you were the hustle defensive type. Like that's how he made a career for himself. Let's be
For
honest.
sure.
Doug
Yeah.
wasn't an offensive weapon in the NBA, at least. Maybe he
Right.
was in college. Everyone who's in the NBA was in college. Like, let's
Right.
also be honest about that.
Yeah.
But okay, Doug, you want to pick up people 94 feet. You want to have this grinded out, tough defensive like thing because you don't have like any other way to really win games. You don't have De'Aaron Fox. You don't have like the pace option anymore. Then you got to play your defensive guys. And right now, without Keegan available, Keon's really the only guy you have who can guard perimeter guys. So shifting gears and going into Doug Christie, I feel like a lot of the Keon discourse falls on Doug Christie. I'm not sure that that's fair because based on the comments that Doug has made, he's almost saying it without saying it that like there is pressure from above to,
Yeah, I agree with that.
you know. But I mean, aside from the Keon thing, how do we feel about Doug Christie? He's 3-7 this season. The defense does not look better than it did last year, despite all the rhetoric around it.
Yep.
He's got a chance now where he built his own coaching staff. He brought in Mike Woodson. He brought in Bobby Jackson. He brought in, whoever. I'm going to extend this out to the coaching staff as a whole, not just Doug Christie. Like, it seems to me like Bobby Jackson's, as a defensive coordinator, his answer to the lack of size and athleticism and defensive prowess has been to run a lot of zones out. And I like zones situationally. Like you can throw a zone out there like on a random play and it might throw the offense of the other team off because they're in the mode of running whatever play that they think in a man coverage. But if you run it more than like 2 or 3 plays, NBA teams just figure out how to eat you alive. So what do you think? What's your assessment of the coaching staff 10 games in?
Doug Christie said something that I thought was really interesting in his post-game press conference last night, where he said straight up, he's like, we have the talent and we have the depth to get it done in that locker room. And I understand that Doug has to say that, and he has to kind of be positive about his team. He can't be like, we got to change the roster over. I understand that, which, by the way, is not what the players are saying. You heard Zach LaVine say that, you're going to have it's a personnel issue, essentially. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was essentially a personnel issue. And so if that's the case, if we have the talent and we have the depth in the locker room, then it comes down to a messaging issue and it comes down to a motivation and cohesion issue. And so that does fall on the coaching staff, specifically on Doug Christie, because Doug is going to be the guy in the room who's going to be preaching that defensive message the most. And he is. During every single interview I see of Doug, he's talking about how the defense needs to play on a string. We need to have cohesion. We need to have I'll be a lot more vocal. I guess they at practice the other day, the whole practice was just about being vocal. It was just trying to get people to talk on defense. So it may take him a little while. Maybe we got to give him more than 10 games to figure that out, but they had a whole offseason to figure it out. There's not a whole lot of new faces. Your mainstays are your mainstays. And so I think that, clearly the message is not getting translated over to the guys. And so that's a problem. That's a big problem. And he said specifically that there's a spirit issue on the team. He said there is a lack of competitive spirit. There's a lack of willingness to fight for your brother on the team.
Okay.
And
I gotta say, look, from my van, I could say whatever I want because I'm just a guy with a microphone right now, right? Like I'm not actually in the locker room. And I'm as much of an old school guy when it comes to coaches and players and that relationship as possible. Like I'll tell you, I think the players make too much money. Like I'm not
of course.
a player I don't side with the players usually, ever, right? But I don't think that going public and challenging your team's spirit when clearly it's a personnel issue is strategically smart. I mean, okay, to your point, he obviously can't say, you can't talk bad about your boss for obvious reasons, right?
Right.
So he can't say Scott Perry didn't do a good job this summer. He didn't bring us a single forward. We'll talk about Scott Perry later, but okay, he can't say that. But like him kind of taking a dump on the players, I don't think is going to be good for the locker room. I don't think it, because the one thing that Doug has going for him is the
He's a
players
player's
like
guy.
him,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a lot else. He doesn't have a resume that he could say, hey, I've coached X amount of teams to the playoffs. I've been to the conference final. Like, he can't say any of that. He's not, any of the more decorated coaches that we theoretically could have hired.
Right.
I think he knows the game. I don't think Doug's dumb. I think he
No.
gets it, right? I think he's going in with a 2 and a 7 offsuit, like he doesn't have the
Right.
cards.
Right.
And there's no amount of bluffing that you're going to do that's going to win you the pot. Like the guy is going into a season with a broken team that doesn't have anyone over 6'5" besides your one big guy who also is undersized and
Right. Yep.
hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that the effort's not there, but then you're not playing the personnel who could maybe guard someone, right? You've got a bunch of isolation players, with probably the exception of Russ. Like,
right.
This is just a strategic error on my part, on the part of Doug. Like Doug,
right.
in my opinion, we were talking about the rah-rah stuff last week. This ain't rah-rah stuff anymore. This is actually finger pointing, and that's, I think, going to compound the problem. And let me ask you, Jeff.
Well, go ahead.
Do you think he survives the season?
Yeah, I do. I do think he survives the season. I think he'll get through next season too, to be totally honest with you, unless we can make some big sweeping changes to the roster. If Scott Perry makes big sweeping changes to the roster, maybe he brings in a new face to kind of, again, wipe the slate clean entirely. But again, I don't think there's a lot of big sweeping changes we can make for any sort of return. I think we talked about that last week. Our players are not highly coveted. But I think that, to Doug's credit, I don't know what you say to these guys to get them to play defense, because defense is an effort thing, right? Like, don't get me wrong, there are some people who are more naturally gifted at it than others, but defensive assignments, doing your defensive assignment, being in the right place at the right time, that is a learned and practiced thing. And so if he has to go to battle with these guys, he does have to call them out in some sense to get them to put in the effort. Because I don't think he's asking everyone to be Scottie Pippen. He's asking them to be in the place they're supposed to be on the court, like he's told them to be. So that's where it becomes an issue. But when you have the players that are basically coming out and saying we don't have the personnel, and then you have the coach who's saying we do have the personnel, I think there's a clear divide there, obviously. And it also, the players know that the roster construction is horrible, which means they know that someone's going to be on the move at some point, which then leads to a lack of buy-in, because they're like, what am I going to buy in on this team for? What am I going to do?
It also plays into, I got to get my numbers.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, is like they're all trying to showcase themselves, because they're like, first of all, I think everyone wants to be one of the ones that gets out of here to a good team, I'm assuming. And again, it goes back to that spirit. If these guys do have that competitive spirit in them, they're like, I'll take the money that I'm making right now and go try to win somewhere.
I mean, when you're watching the Kings, though, does it look like an effort issue?
On the defensive end, yes.
Okay.
And I think I will say this. I think we have a lot of guys that are fun to watch in the offensive end that when they have the ball in their hands, they are able to go to work and do some things that look impressive. And those offensive skills kind of, they hope, put a shadow over their defensive inabilities. And so you have some guys that are doing well, again, like Westbrook and like Zach LaVine and DeRozan, who are putting up good numbers, but they're putting up good numbers on the offensive end, and we're getting blown out by 30 the last 2 games. So, like,
Okay.
congrats on the numbers, but it doesn't do anything for us.
So 2 things. The last 2 games, I think it should be mentioned because I think that this is fair. The last 2 games were against Oklahoma City and Minnesota. That was the conference finals last year, if I'm not mistaken. Those are basically 2 of the best 3 teams in the West, probably 2 of the best 4 or 5 teams in the entire league.
Yeah, those were L's on the schedule, that's for sure.
So I think that needs to be stated, number 1. Number 2, you said that defense is primarily effort thing. I think that's okay. Everyone knows in the NBA what gets you paid is scoring points. So, that's not as sexy to be like a lockdown defender who's not particularly great. Unless you're like all NBA defense, then you get paid. But like if you're just a solid defender,
right,
those guys, So
which
I
is
don't
why
want
these guys are not willing to buy in, because they're like, I'm not going to hurt my offensive numbers by trying to buy in on the defensive end.
I don't. Yeah, but I don't want to completely poo-poo what you're saying. Like there is a huge element of effort there. But to Jerry Reynolds' point, so Jerry does the post game with Grant. Very nostalgic. I enjoy it. And Jerry made a point, which is like, okay, Russell Westbrook, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, take your pick, even Sabonis to some extent, but specifically those 3 guys, they're all over 30 years old.
Right.
You're not going to change who you are as a player after 30. So,
of course,
I think that, and this is more of a philosophical and maybe, dare I say, cosmic conversation, but I think when we look back at Mike Brown's downfall as the head coach of the Kings, I think one of the main issues that he had, kind of looking back at it, was it's always like a question of like, do you coach the team you have or do you coach a system and try to get players who fit the system? And I think that it really depends. There's no right answer. I think in year 1, Mike said, well, this is what I have. So this is the system we're going to run because those are the players I have. And it was successful. Right. And then in year 2, he's like, well, if we ever want to advance in the playoffs, now we got to focus more on defense. And that's where now you're benching Kevin Huerter and you're playing who's that kid that they brought in from Indiana? What was his name?
I can't remember his name, honestly.
You know who I'm talking about,
yeah.
though, right? It's going to come to me as soon as I hit end recording. So anyways, and then that kid couldn't play, and now you ruin Huerter. And like, whatever. Huerter, like, that's another story. Doing really well in Chicago this year, by the way. Chicago's also doing really well now that they got rid of Zach LaVine. But I think that if you're Doug Christie, and these next 2 years are kind of just whatever anyways, because like the salary cap is screwed and the roster is screwed, maybe you should, instead of like talking all this defense and doing all this, coach the team you have. And the team you currently have is just not going to be this 94 feet grinded out defensive team. They're not. And so for his own self-preservation, he should probably be coaching in a way that's most likely to win games in the short term for self-preservation reasons, because the narrative around him trying to do this system thing with misfit pieces is people are going to look at him like he can't coach. And I think that that's kind of where we're at.
Do you think that he can coach this team and this roster in a way that can win games in the short term?
I'm trying to buy time so I can think, folks.
I mean, I think
the first 20 games of the season were screwed no matter what,
yeah,
even
of course.
with Keegan, right?
Correct. But I think, again, my understanding of what you're saying, my interpretation of what you're saying is like, you got to become an offensive juggernaut because that's all you have. You actually do have individual players who can put up good offensive numbers. But where you run into a wall on that argument is that you have individual players who do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we have a high 3-point shooting team in terms of percentages of our shots. It's not like we have guys who are going to be going out and doing amazing individual things all at the same time. Because again, with DeRozan and LaVine on the court, they want to do the same thing.
Okay.
Westbrook is putting up good numbers, but he's also not a high 3-point shooter, even though he's actually playing very well from the 3-point this year. He's not the kind of guy. We don't have the roster construction where you're going to put up 140 a night. We just don't have that kind of roster.
Okay. I'm going to segue, but this is going to answer your question. I'm going to segue into Scott Perry because I think that this is really important. I said last week, and I got some pushback from some of the listeners about losing a trade. Like, you can't just keep losing trades. I think when you look back at what Scott Perry did this summer, by basically you traded Valanciunas, you lost Jake LaRavia, which was outside of his control, to be honest. And I'm kind of wondering if there was just no plan B there. Maybe that's why they didn't go after a forward, because they thought they were going to re-sign him. You use your cap room to sign Dennis Schroeder, and then you sign Russell Westbrook for a league minimum, who's been better than Dennis Schroeder up to this point.
Right.
I think that there is a way to answer your question that Doug could coach this team. I'm trying to word this correctly, with a couple of moves by Scott Perry where they could win games in the short term, especially once you get Keegan Murray back, and especially once you get out of the first 20 games of the season. You just got to stay above water, or somewhere near water anyways,
right,
until then, right?
Yeah.
I do. Hypothetically, if you just said, you know what, Russ is our starting point guard, you already signed Dennis Schroeder, so you can't do anything about that. And you were to somehow okay, Russ is your starter. You start him with Zach, and then, Keon Ellis, that's your 3-guard set to start. So you have a defender there, and he's a good support player. And then you're bringing DeMar off the bench. And then you got DeMar and Malik as your scorers off the bench. And you have 2 6 men functionally. I think that would probably work better. I think the problem that you run into is, does Doug Christie have the juice to be able to bench DeMar DeRozan,
right,
future Hall of Famer, right? That's, I think, a
Yep.
problem. And that's a problem in roster construction. And then if you were somehow to get another forward who can play, alongside Keegan at times and alongside Sabonis at times as a power forward, so Doug could hypothetically, in the short term, coach a winning team that's an offensive juggernaut, I believe, if there were a couple just small moves that Scott Perry could make. But I think that when we're looking at Scott Perry, we do have to start drawing some conclusions 10 games into the season. He made some really serious miscalculations this summer. He traded Valanciunas, spent a lot of money to bring in Dennis Schroeder, who is not performing, and said after the game last night that he is confused and he doesn't know where he's supposed to be or what his role on the team is. So I'll throw it back to you. How much of that's Doug and how much of that is Scott?
Doug Christie did say that Dennis Schroeder is hurt, or he said hobbled. So he said that once Schroeder is back to 100%, he expects to see better results from him. Kind of an aside. again, I think Doug, first of all, I think Doug has to coach the team that is placed in front of him. So I think in terms of roster construction, you can't put it on Doug. And I think that there was limited moves for Scott Perry to make over the summer. I really don't blame Scott Perry for making the moves that he made. I think there was some tweaks you could make to what he did. Again, I think you could not sign Dennis Schroeder like we talked about last week, and you could just sign Russ. But it is what it is. We needed a point guard. We weren't sure. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes with Russ. I don't know if Russ was waiting for a bigger deal. I don't know what was going on. So maybe he would not have taken that veteran minimum earlier in the summer. I just don't know. I have a question for you that I've been curious about when it comes to DeMar DeRozan.
Okay.
Because my thought process on him is that anyone we trade him to is most likely going to make him their sixth man. I would assume he's not going to get traded to go be a starter somewhere. Yeah. And so if that's the case, just do it now. And I understand he's going to be butthurt about it or whatever, and that's fine. But that's where his path is going. He's on that path. So do what's best for the Kings and do it.
Okay, so let's like game theory this out a little bit. So you are going to take him out of the starting lineup and you're going to put Keon Ellis in the starting lineup, right?
Right.
Okay, so if that becomes a locker room issue, how do you deal with that? That's why they paid Doug the small bucks, right?
Say. Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I will say this. Everything I've ever heard about DeMar DeRozan is that he's a pro's pro. He's like one of the most professional guys in the NBA. And so I think first and foremost, you got to rely on that to be the case. Okay. And then if that's not the case, you have to move him because you still have to do what's best for the team because what's happening now is not working. Right. So what's the worst case scenario? He does that and becomes a locker room cancer and we keep him on board. It's going to continue to not work. Extrapolate out the record, right? It's like it doesn't make a difference. So if he starts doing that, you move him, and you probably have to lose on a trade, which we're probably gonna have to do anyways.
Yeah. You know what's worse than losing a trade?
I actually think that simple move could help the Kings significantly, as long as he had some sort of a buy-in.
You know what's worse than losing a trade?
Letting somebody walk for free.
Yes. The Kings have a long history of doing that. Eventually, that's the road we're going down with DeMar DeRozan functionally because his contract. Well, we already covered that. But DeRozan, he's partially guaranteed for next year, so he's functionally in a expiring contract anyways. So he's going to ask the Kings not to pick up his option next year. Take his money and go somewhere else where he can win. If you can get literally a playable forward for him right now, or I'll even take maybe a second round pick or two, or like if it's like a really good team, you want to give us like the 28th pick next year, I'll take that. Right.
Right.
But I think that unfortunately, these things are not being driven by Scott Perry or Doug Christie. I think that Vivek is driving a lot of these decisions. I don't want to go into Vivek yet, so I'm just going to put that out there, put a pin in it, come back to it. Just to check a few more boxes here. Where are we on some of the young guys? I think that we should probably, at least check in on how we're feeling about Neek, how we're feeling about Maxime, and dare I ask, Devin Carter.
You know what? I've seen Maxime play a bit, and I like what I see out of him. I think he's got effort. It was actually funny. I actually laughed out loud. DeMar DeRozan made a free throw at kind of like a random point in like the third quarter. It wasn't like an and one free throw. It was just a normal free throw. And Maxime gave like a heavy fist bump when he made it. And I was just like, all right, sick. Like, I guess this guy's got a little energy. So I like seeing that. I like that he's obviously getting some playing time. I want to see him develop. I think while we have no forwards, I think we should be letting him play a lot, honestly.
Okay.
I think we should be getting him the developmental time, especially because he is playing with like we'll say legendary talent, high quality talent, like right, like being on the floor with these guys can be a confidence booster in and of itself.
I mean, Russ, like it's still weird seeing him in a Kings uniform.
Right,
It's Russ,
and he's looking kind of vintage Russ, so it's
and
a
he
little
is, yeah.
it's very strange to see. So like I think getting a young guy like that on there can help. Nate Clifford, I honestly have not seen enough out of him to make a real judgment call yet.
I agree. I agree with that 100%.
But he's a player that I want learning from Russ. I want learning from these professionals, because I think part of the problem with the Kings organization historically is that we have not had the most professional guys on the team. And so having these guys who are pros teaching Neek how to approach the game is going to be very helpful for his development long term. And then Devin Carter, I think, is a project that we can probably cross out at this point. I haven't seen anything out of Devin Carter that would make me think he has any sort of a future.
He's got energy, and he's a good athlete, but that doesn't get it done in the NBA.
Right, it's the NBA.
That's not enough. And obviously with the logjam that you currently do have on the roster, like it doesn't even make sense to try to force him, to get some minutes, because it's like really the only thing you can do is when you get blown the F out, like they have the last 2 games, is give Maxime and Neek and Devin extended run during the fourth quarter.
Right.
Which, to be clear, like I'm not going to totally kill Doug for this, but having Sabonis, who's hurt, on the floor until there's like 4 something left in the game was just absolutely wild and insane. I don't know if you're trying to let him hit his stats or whatever, but it's just not a good look. It's not a good look.
So I think we agree on Neek and Devin. What are your thoughts on Maxime?
Yeah, man. I mean, I said it during Summer League. I think he's got a higher floor and ceiling than Neek. That doesn't mean he's going to be a better player, because if he's closer to his floor and Neek's closer to his ceiling, Neek's going to be a better player. Neek's definitely more NBA ready. Maxime's a young guy. He's 19. I kind of am struggling to compare him to anyone. I can't think of anyone. He moves well for a big guy. He has good fluid movement. He doesn't look clumsy when he's moving around, but I think he's a little timid for whatever reason. And he's not being incorporated really into the offense that much when he is on the floor, because again, you have a bunch of ISO guys.
Right.
Russ, Malik, it didn't happen with Malik because Malik was out with the birth of his child, but like Malik, Russ, they could run a 2-man game with him, and that might be more interesting. And I think those would be more valuable minutes than putting him out there with DeMar and Zach. But look, I like in short doses what I've seen, but you just got to get him more minutes. I mean, if it's him or Drew Eubanks, just play Maxime.
Exactly.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Exactly. When I saw Drew getting big minutes last game, I was like, what are we doing here? What's the point? What's the point? We might as well get these young guys developed.
As a last thing on the roster construction, Zach LaVine. He's an absolutely graceful, marvelous offensive weapon. And I knew he was good before the Kings got him, and he's probably like 5 to 10% better than I thought he was offensively. Mm-hmm. My big picture take on him hasn't really changed, but let me ask you, do you think there could be a role for him long-term with the franchise?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
And honestly, I think Scott Perry said it best. And he said this in an interview, God, a number of years ago. But he said Zach LaVine is an amazing offensive player, and he does do things that light up the crowd, but
Mm-hmm.
he does not translate to winning in any way. And so we don't need the stat sheet stuffers, and we don't need the highlight plays. Clearly, there's something that happens with Zach LaVine, and again, this is where my basketball knowledge falls short because I'm not a coach. I don't know how these things all play together, but
Mm-hmm.
he is not the kind of player that elevates all of the players around him. And so, to answer your question, no, I do not think that Zach LaVine has a place on our team long term, just based on his history. Because I think he's a known commodity at this point. I don't think anyone's going to pick up Zach LaVine, or I don't think he's going to turn into something on the Sacramento Kings that we're like, you know what, I was wrong about him.
Okay, let me throw a scenario at you. He's owed $49 million next year.
Hmm.
If you were to sit him down and say, Zach, we're willing to sign you to an extension, but you have to opt out of that $49 million a year. And we're going to give you 4 years, I don't know, like 115 million. So you're coming in at a little under 30 million a year. And it's going to be decreasing. So your money's going to be up front more, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The guy's averaging over 30 points a game. He's got, at 30 years old, he's got at least another 4 years in him.
Sure.
Maybe not at this level, but at a high level. I mean, are the Kings going to be able to find another guy that good to play shooting guard? Obviously, you don't want him as a top 2 player. But I mean, if you're going to give Keegan Murray $28 million a year, wouldn't you be willing to give that to Zach LaVine?
So I don't know how the cap space works and what the cap
Okay.
implications of that would be, but would that allow us to go out and sign somebody who could be the number 1 player? Because I think that's my main issue, right? Like, you want to tell me Zach LaVine is a quote unquote role player on the team, or you want to
Number
have
3.
him, right? If Zach LaVine's our number 3 on the team, I think we're looking good, right? But Zach LaVine's never been a number 3. He's only ever been a number 1 option.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, I guess you could say number 2 option behind Sabonis on our team. I'm not sure what you would say at this point, but he is a bucket getter, and is he going to be able to function on a team where he's the 3rd option and he's not the guy to go get the buckets?
Yeah, because he's not the guy to go get you the bucket in the 4th quarter right now. That's DeMar DeRozan, right? He's your number 1 option the first 3 quarters, and then the 4th
Correct.
quarters,
Yep.
whatever. So, I mean,
Yep.
you need that because you need points. Like, that is still the name of the game. So, obviously, he was a Vivek pickup. What I'm a little bit concerned with, to shift gears here, I just to put that out there, I would explore something like that if he would be open to it. You're going to really take that $49 million a year and kind of stretch it out a little bit, which I think would make him more palatable in trades anyways. But even if he wasn't, like, I think at $30 million, you can stomach that. Because that is like number 3 money. That's not number 1 or number 2 money. Right. So that's kind of my thought process. But shifting gears, so Zach LaVine was brought in. He's a Vivek guy. I suspect that Russ was a Vivek move.
I would suspect the same thing.
And considering that Russ has probably been the Kings' best player, him or Zach anyways, which that combination of those two, one of those two,
Hey, maybe Vivek knows what he's doing.
Is maybe going to think to Vivek, is maybe going to make Vivek feel like, I know what I'm doing, right? And then I just want to throw another thing out there. Vivek left the game early last night, which he never does.
Sure.
What do we think about Mr. Ranadivé?
I did see the clip of him leaving yesterday, and I saw the clip of him sitting on the sidelines with Scott Perry, and it did not look like a pleasant conversation was taking place. They looked like they were having some words about something. Bro, we're so aligned on Vivek Ranadivé, and I think we're aligned with the rest of the Kings fan base on Vivek. We are not going to be good until he's gone. That's just the way that it is. The meddling, you can look at every sport where the owner is meddling in the day-to-day operations and the roster construction, and it always goes sideways. So I don't think that this is any different. We've seen it time after time with Vivek. And again, I totally agree that Westbrook was his idea and his pickup, but he's trying to sell tickets, right? That's what he's trying to do with that pickup. Because again, having Russell Westbrook in a Kings jersey is cool, especially when he's playing like vintage Russ. But
Kings are 1-9 without Russ right now.
Sure, but we're 3-7 with Russ.
Well, we're 3-7 with Russ, so it's like
who cares, right? Like this is what we were talking about the other day, where it's like if Russ is your best player, you got big problems. If Russ is even your third or fourth best player in 2025, you got big problems. So yeah, I don't think that. Back to what we were talking about, you know, Vivek is not going to be somebody who has a positive influence on this franchise in terms of players and in terms of roster construction. So obviously he needs to stay out of it, which he's not going to.
One thing that I'm slightly going to push back on is this notion that like you need an owner who doesn't meddle. I would say generally that's true, but there's this reverence that I feel like people hold, quote unquote, the basketball people like up on a pedestal that is not deserved either. Like, I don't think basketball typically is that hard. And I will take it a step further. I think that there's kind of an innate thing that happens where like either you have it or you don't. Like there's people who can just look at a player and be like, oh yeah, that guy's going to be a player in the NBA. And like, there's no like number crunching or analytics or anything that's going to replace that. And I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not saying if I was the GM of the King, like if I was the GM of the Kings, I would have told you when the Kings had DeMarcus Cousins that and the Rudy Gay and all those guys, all you needed was a point guard like Rondo. Like that would tie it all together. And then, you know, somehow the Kings got Rondo and we saw what that was. So like, I'm not the guy. I'm like, let me put that out there.
Right.
So I'm not going to be the one to sit here and be like, here's the move you should make. But I'm pretty good at looking at stuff and being like, that's definitely not the move you should make, you know? And I think that that's kind of really what a good owner could be, is like metal, but metal in a way that's like part of like a bigger process. I think when you have an owner that's like, yeah, we need to get Russ and we need to get Zach LaVine because he's excited and he could dunk and he won the dunk contest, like, or whatever his thought process is. Like, that's actually what the problem is. But I think to take it a step further, and this is like my big bullet point, going back to the Keon Ellis thing and the Dante DiVincenzo thing and whatever, the Kings are ran like a second-class organization. And I do think that goes back to Vivek. I think that the way that they treat people is not professional. It's not right. And it violates all kinds of professional etiquette. I'm going to say it. I hope it's not too controversial in 2025. I grew up watching the Kings, and that meant watching Gary Gerald's on the radio. Well, not watching Gary Gerald's, but listening to Gary Gerald's on the radio and watching Grant and Jerry. And the way that Grant was treated by this franchise is disgusting.
Yeah, okay? Despicable.
It's whatever you think about what he said is irrelevant. The guy had that job for 32 years. He's a asshole New Yorker. I get it. Like, he's not a nice guy. I'm not like a huge Grant fan personally, but the way that he was dismissed from the franchise is disgusting and it's inexcusable. The way that the franchise showed Mike Brown the door
I was just about to say the Mike Brown firing.
And again, I'm not a Mike Brown fan, but you did
There's
it
just a way you do things. There's just
two
a way
days
to do
after
things.
Christmas,
Right.
letting him run practice.
Yeah, he ran practice
while
that
he's
morning.
en route to the airport. It's just like, dude, what are you doing? This is not how you operate a friend. And I don't know if Vivek's trying to bring this like Silicon Valley startup like dickhead culture with him or whatever, but it's not how you do business in the NBA. It's not how you do business. And then,
Right.
just to compound things, you're worried about ruffling Rich Paul and De'Aaron Fox's feathers on his way out. It's like, if you want to be a dickhead, like their mentality is actually totally backwards. Like they're dickheads to the little people, the Grants and the Mike Browns, but they'll cater to Rich Paul while he's trying to screw your franchise, right? Like if you're gonna be a dickhead,
but the thing is,
send De'Aaron Fox to Washington just to stick it to him.
but here's the thing. I don't know if they're even intentionally being dickheads. Because again, you look at the Mike Brown firing. I can tell you, when somebody gets fired, it's usually a very decisive decision, and you do it at a very specific time of day and a very specific day of the week to eliminate any other blowback, anything else that could possibly happen. Correct. This looks more of like a timidity issue. It looks like there's not a firm decision being made. They should have known Wednesday morning when Mike was coaching the practice that they were going to fire him on whatever day they were going to fire him. But the optics are that they didn't even know if they were going to fire him that day. And then it turns out, okay, I guess we're going to fire him. That's where the timidity comes in. It's the same thing with the De'Aaron Fox trade. You're so timid. You're scared. You don't want Rich Paul to bully you. You don't want to ruffle any feathers on the way out the door. Like, if you're going to be a dick, do it intentionally is what I'm trying to say. I think they're being accidental dicks. And that's even worse.
That's way worse.
Of course.
That's way worse.
Right.
So,
so I think you got to, back to Vivek, I would be so much happier if Vivek was ruling with an iron fist and doing poorly. It seems like he doesn't have any idea what he's doing and doing poorly. And that's what's most bothersome.
Where's the humility to just be like, I've been at this for 12 years. My batting average is extremely low.
Right.
I mean, like I said on the last
does he care
podcast,
about wins? Does he care about wins? I know he goes to every game. Like he can't enjoy watching them get blown out. But if you look at from a business, like, did he buy this as a team or did he buy it as a business? Because from a business, he's blown it out.
I think that if he bought it as a business, I think his behavior would be differently. I don't think he'd be sitting courtside at these games. I don't think that, based on what we hear, reporters like James Ham and people like that, like he's texting Scott Perry and Doug Christie every day with ideas to bounce ideas off of them. Like he wouldn't be this involved if he didn't give a damn, right?
Right.
So I think that the business stuff is gravy. It's like, oh yeah, like this valuation of $500 million now is like worth, what were the Kings worth? Like three or 4 billion or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. You've 6 to 7x your money. Good for you, man. Like, kudos. There's always the risk that if he were to sell, he's going to sell to someone else who wants to move the team. So, like, let's kind of grant a little grace here because he did save the team.
Right.
But at some point, there needs to be humility and be like, look, and like a mea culpa here, I think would go so far in Sacramento. Like, guys, I messed this up. I apologize. Like, I'm taking a step back. I'm going to hire a GM. Like, I was thinking about this, like one strategy to kind of speed run this thing to like get to the other side quicker. Pay the luxury tax. Like, we'll take on another team's bad contract if they're willing to attach draft picks to it, and we're just gonna eat it for the next 2 years because I've done such a piss poor job managing the finances and the talent evaluation here that I'm gonna pay out of my own pocket for these mistakes, to undo some of these mistakes, to get some more draft picks. I'm gonna pay a coach who's actually competent. Not that Doug's like incompetent in
I
like
understand
a
your point.
absolute sense, but it's like, is Doug Christie the best person you could have put in that position?
Right.
No, but he was the cheapest. So is that why you did it? And like, as long as you know that he's making like 40% less than the next lowest paid coach, you're always going to wonder if this was a financial decision. So that's my 2 cents about it. So I don't know, man.
These guys got big egos, man. I think we're in it for the long haul with Vivek. I don't think there's a whole lot of way we can get around that one. And if I'm being honest, moment of truth here.
Yeah.
If I was the owner of an NBA franchise, I'd meddle too.
So would
that's the God's honest truth.
All right. So after after beating San Francisco, and by the way, for the record, because I've had people say this, like, oh, they're Golden State. You don't know they're Golden State. I'm not giving them the whole state. They play in San Francisco. I call them San Francisco.
Correct.
You beat San Francisco. Then you lost to OKC and Minnesota. Jeez, I can't read. You got
I will say
Denver, Atlanta, and Minnesota again on the schedule in an NBA Cup game. How are we looking this week?
Of the next 20 games, we talked about it. We talked about it on the last podcast. I think we identified maybe 1, possibly 2 wins on the schedule out of the next 20 games from that point, and we have gotten 2 lucky wins out of that schedule. So we got to feel good about that. I think the Denver is going to be a real tough matchup for us. Atlanta, we circled earlier as a potential win, but I think
Trae Young is out.
That helps a lot. It is the second night of a back-to-back, so we'll see how that goes. And Minnesota is going to be Minnesota, and then we get to go see our good friend De'Aaron Fox in San Antonio. I will watch that game intently, even though it's going to go incredibly poorly for us.
I think that kind of updating, what we said, because you had 38, I had 39 wins, just to kind of one up you.
Right.
And I think we both revised down once we found out about the Keegan Murray injury, I think we both kind of revised that down. I'm kind of at a point where I don't think I don't know how you feel. It doesn't feel like the Kings 17 win season before they drafted Tyreek Evans. Like, I don't think it's a 17 win season.
No, I think we'll win 30 games this year.
You think we're going to win 30?
Yeah, because I think at some point in this season, we'll be at full strength and we'll rattle off like 4 or 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And it's going to come in bunches.
If the wheels don't come off before then, though, that's a thing. Like,
sure.
That's the danger, is like, because the schedule is so front loaded, if you can somehow come out like ideally like 7-13 would have been great, but like even 6-14, maybe you're like in striking distance to do something the last 60 games.
Right.
But what you don't want is like a 4-16. And considering you already have 3 wins, I think that they'll probably get at least 2 more before we hit the 20 games. Like,
that's what I would think.
You just don't want to go 0-4 here. Like Denver, Atlanta, Minnesota, and San Antonio. In a perfect world, you'd like to go 2-2 there. Realistically, 1-3.
I think you're hoping
1-3.
to get 1 there.
You just don't want that 0-4. Like, that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
You just don't want to get that 0-4. You want to get 1 out of the next 4, and if you get 1, be greedy and try to get another one and try to go 2-2, because you're definitely not going 3-1. So
if you can get tomorrow night against Denver, you're going in extremely happy into Atlanta, and you got to try to capitalize on that big time.
Yeah,
but that's a big ask for Denver. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Realistically, if you get blown out early, you got the young guys, and then maybe you're fresh for Atlanta. That's kind of the other one.
That might be a strategy also.
That might be a strategy.
Before we sign off, I got a quick question for you. Thoughts on Ja Morant?
Yeah, I mean, I would explore it. I don't want to. I know we're at the end here, so I don't want to do too long of a thing, but he's not been convicted of anything, and
I don't care about that at all.
I think
his criminal record means nothing to me.
I think the gun waving is more of like a judgment issue more than anything. At some point, he's going to grow up, right? Like,
That's it.
that's, I think, I mean, the Kings traded for Chris Webber, who was, you know, in and out of court on like marijuana charges back in the day. And that kind of worked
Drugs.
out. I'm not saying that like throw the farm at John Morant, but if you could get him for like a pick in matching salaries, I think you have to explore that, especially if you have Russ
for
on the
that
team.
you do it immediately. I mean, honestly, in my opinion on Josh,
Throw in Keon Ellis since we're not going to resign
sure,
him anyway.
since he's a throwaway anyways, throw him in. I think John Morant is a guy.
That's the type of move that like speed runs your timeline for sure.
Yeah, he's a guy. And so I think he's one of those guys that you got to be willing to take the risk that he could start waving guns around again. but he's a guy. He's somebody that if available, we should make a serious run at.
Well, if he's available, they need to explore all avenues. Probably not going to happen until February anyway. So in the meantime, go Kings.
Go Kings.